Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Munish Khurana. I work for Eurocontrol, and we are in the business of supporting the European aviation by ensuring safety of air navigation. So integration of, or safe integration of new entrants like the drones and eVTOLs in the airspace is of utmost importance to us. Now, this webinar is part of a series of many webinars that Amsterdam Drone Week organizers have established and delivered in the past. And this one is titled The Latest Developments in Air Mobility Services in the Middle East. Advanced air mobility is a market that you will recognize is evolving, and it's evolving continuously. At least I get the impression the rate with which it's evolving is increasing slowly but surely. Now, the development of infrastructure was one of the pillars of the advanced air mobility, which was lagging behind maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But it is now, there's enough evidence now that it's picking up momentum as we go forward. Now, regulations across the world are being defined and for various parts of the ecosystem of advanced air mobility, whether it's to do with the vehicles or the vertiports, the infrastructure, or the UTM or U-space, as we call it in Europe itself, and also the various operations. And largely speaking, regulations are focused on risk-based operations, and therefore the criteria involved is risk-based. Although I must admit that the harmonization of regulations across the globe is still a challenge. We don't know that they will be harmonized. We hope and we expect them to be harmonized. The other thing important to know about advanced air mobility is that the national and regional priorities, they are acting as catalysts to drive the advanced air mobility operations. I'll give you some examples. If you take Paris Olympics this summer, or the Osaka Expo in Japan in 2025, as well as the Winter Olympics in Italy in 2026. Now, these just act as catalysts for driving more and more, trying to meet milestones within many things, including advanced air mobility. But one exciting region where the development is taking place, perhaps in a relatively fast way, is the Middle East. And that's what we are here to talk about today. In this webinar, we will look at the advanced air mobility services sector in the Middle East. We'll focus on their national objectives. We will discuss their business needs, but at the same time, we'll also look at the maturity of the advanced air mobility. Where exactly is it in terms of the supply? And the challenges and opportunities they currently face. We see challenges being faced. There are some common challenges that all sectors and all regions face, but there are some specific ones that some regions face different to others. Now, today, to help me with this webinar, I'm joined by 5 panelists. 4 of them are here, and we're waiting for the 5th one, should be here any minute. And these gentlemen will share their thoughts about these drivers that we talked about. They will share an overview of their organization to give us a key message. And after that, we will have a discussion, an interactive discussion, to deep dive in some selected areas that will be beneficial for you to listen to. I encourage all of you to submit your questions, and I, as your moderator, will try and address those questions. Now, to address your questions, ladies and gentlemen, please use the chat window that you can see at the bottom of your screen. If you put your questions there, I will pick them up from there and try and address them to the panelists, and I'll do my best. So let me introduce my panelists already. I'm joined today by Malik Al-Nabani, and Malik is the COO and the co-founder of an organization called SERB in Oman. So welcome, Malik. The next panelist is Mr. Omran Hassan Malik. Omran is the Assistant Manager, Emerging Technologies, General Civil Aviation Authority, also known as GCAA in the UAE. Welcome, Omran. We're also joined by Kim Cylinder, Kim is the founder of a company called Cookie Jar. They're a vertiports company, and he will talk more about it later on. Welcome, Kim. Then we have from Turkey, we have Mesut Yilmaz. Mesut is an eVTOL program director, and he works for a company called the Gozun Holding, which is a very large organization in the aviation sector. Again, Mesut will talk more about it later on. Welcome to you, Mesut. And the fifth panelist, we're still waiting. I'll introduce as soon as he joins. But let's start anyway. Let's start the webinar. Let me first start with Malik. Malik, could you perhaps give our audience, maybe in about 4 or 5 minutes, a key message about your organization, what it does, and what's your motivation in the whole advanced air mobility services industry? Over to you, Malik.
Thank you, Monish, for having me here alongside with our colleagues from the air mobility. So, as you know, that today that number of drones are increasing. Technology is already exist. A huge part also from the physical infrastructure exists. But always there is a component which is missing when it's come to the digital infrastructure. So SERB is, this is where we work. This is our core, is building the infrastructure alongside with the civil aviation authorities in the region. So SERB is enable for UAVs operations with the civil aviation authorities using our advanced UTM solution to provide safe and sufficient and compliant flights with regulations. So at the same time, we provide the regularity, a very clear visualization of the operation in the low altitude airspace. Now, the low altitude airspace, it doesn't only include, yes, today is including the drones, but tomorrow maybe another objects will be part of the low altitude airspace as part of this ecosystem. So we provide all of these visualization to the regulations and with the different parameters and different communication protocols. Our UTM also, it's able to integrate with any physical infrastructure that already exists, like radars, like anti-drone or detection system, that to provide more information when it's come to the regulation. So we provide our services basically to the users, and we have different kind of users. So the recreational pilots and the commercial pilots, and also we provide a set of services when it's come to the enterprise level, where we can help them to operate their drone operations or UAVs in a very efficient way. Our commitment goes beyond adopting new technologies of UTM, but it's all about also reshaping the future of the advanced air mobility in Oman and the region.
Thank you, Malika. That's very clear and concise. So actually, you're looking at not just using the UTM technologies to manage your drones in the lower altitude, but I think you're looking at perhaps a long term to try and go beyond that in future. But what is interesting from your key message, and hopefully we'll learn more about it later on, is the ability of your UTM technology to integrate with the existing aviation infrastructure. So thank you for that. May I now ask my next panelist, Omran, to deliver your key message on how GCAA sees the whole thing and what's the motivation, please.
Thank you, Manish. Thank you, Amsterdam Drone Week, for hosting us this panel and showcasing the developments in the Middle East region, where, as you rightly said, Manish, it's developing at quite a rapid pace, almost matching how fast the industry is. Sometimes we want to be faster, but we have to respect the pace of the industry. I'll take you through a story of how the development has progressed within the UAE. It started, believe it or not, since 2017. We have an annual summit, the World Government Summit, where the Crown Prince, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, the ruler of Dubai, announced the launch of the air taxi project. That was the first launch, and we had Volocopter back then making a demonstration flight. Of course, we know that now the industry back then we were aiming for the next 2 years to be ready to operate. But COVID came and whatnot. But a year after that, in 2018, we have developed a regulatory framework to allow experimental operations way before many leading states have produced any regulation. Even during the midst of COVID 2020, we have published the CAR UAM, Urban Air Mobility. Basically, it is not so prescriptive or detailed, with the aim of it being, we decided to go with a standalone regulation. And this is a hurdle where many leading regulatory authorities face, which is trying to connect advanced air mobility or the eVTOL industry, let's call it, to pre-existing regulations. The famous mantra is why this should fall under existing regulations. Well, it is not a helicopter, it is not an airplane, it is somewhere in between. What do we call it? And this is when you have a lot of, two prominent regulatory members calling it different things. So we start to see divergence where we want to see really convergence, as you said. We want to see harmonization. There has been a lot of talk about that during the Drone Enable Symposium, which was held last December, of the industry and regulators calling for harmonization, especially not just within the regulatory landscape, but especially within the certification landscape, because for states such as the Middle East, where we do not type certify, we validate, we do not want an call it OEM, being produced, let's say, in the United States, and it has an assembly line in Europe. We have to face different types of certification processes. Going back to the timeline, in 2022, there has been Xpeng did the demo in Dubai in 2023. I'll go 1 year back, sorry, 2019 even. We produced the General Assembly of ICAO a working paper calling the states and calling ICAO to establish a framework for this emerging mode of transport and aviation. The good thing is the next assembly after that in 2022, the United States, Brazil, Japan, and one organization, IKEA, I think it was called. They submitted working papers, and a working group has been formed. It's the Advanced Air Mobility Study Group, which UAE is a part of, and many leading member states as well. So also we have produced the regulation for car HVD in April last year. That is concerning vertiports. And what we have put as well, though we did not know the roadmap, of course, we used the Engineering Bulletin 105, the EASA regulations, as looking in between, what do we use? And we came up with a, so you can say cherry-picked best of both worlds. But we also put something, just a title, that is hybrid operations, and using basically what we are working on this year is using existing infrastructure for hybrid operation for helicopters. So that is, we want to enable that industry. That industry will require, a lot of capital startup, and infrastructure is not cheap. So therefore, using existing infrastructure will allow that vertiport areas to be used as for helicopters as well as for eVTOLs. Um, as well as we're engaging with research institutes for things that are unknown to us, but we want to find solution. And that is common in the Western world, but we are starting to do that more and more to guide us to shape, a lot of things that we don't know how with the vertiport areas between buildings, the vortices, how they are going to react. Um, Much like Malik and Nabhani, UTM airspace, how they will fly, the eVTOLs with the drones in such a tight airspace, and the space with the new UAEs. I mean, the airspace is not so big because you have, Dubai Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. So you have to confine all these in such a tight space. So we have a lot going on, and a lot of OEMs have submitted types certificate validation applications. Um, so yeah, that's keeping us really busy. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for a fairly comprehensive overview, Omran. And so certainly you haven't just been busy now. You've been busy since 2017, since the Crown Prince actually announced the overall project, and that's wonderful. And what I like, the way things have evolved since then, of course, is what you highlighted as well, is now that the ICAO have also established an advanced air mobility study group, and GCA is part of it, no doubt. We are at Eurocontrol also part of it, and that is giving us now a vehicle to move forward in a harmonized way. Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's move to the next speaker, which is Mesut from Turkey. And Mesut, could you inform our audience on what Golden Holding does and what's your motivation in the advanced air mobility industry, please?
Hi, thank you very much, Mishin, and thank you for hosting us as a panelist. And Gözen is like a 43 years, like a pioneer in aviation in Turkey as a private sector. What does Gözen is doing? I mean, is an airline operator and also air services, like a business jets, and they got aviation safety group, and they got ATO, airline training centers, Istanbul and also Antalya, like 5 right now, but it's 6 is coming. 6 like a 5 Airbus, 4 Airbus, 2 right now is a Boeing 737. Airline is a licensed ATO. I mean, airlines training centers, and also they've been doing their travel agency too. So Gözen is, I mean, 2021. I mean, they had get together with Avalon and first started with the electrification of aircraft, like a big eVTOL companies. Right now, we start with the vertical company, is England, UK based aviation company, a OEM. We start with them. We sign OEM. I mean, we sign MOU with them, and right now we're planning to get 100 eVTOLs in Istanbul. Start with Istanbul, because Istanbul is a capacity of like a 50-60 million people travel by ferries around the Bosphorus area. And also we have some nice resorts like a Bodrum, Antalya. I mean, those are the key areas, Cappadocia. Those are the touristic area and also historical areas too, around Istanbul and Cappadocia, Antalya, Bodrum, and also Greek islands. We have incentive for those areas, and also they have a right now. I mean, they believe that electrification of the aircraft. I mean, this is eVTOLs, like a big zero carbon and also environmental free, and also safety wise, and also we have. I mean, we believe in the electrification of the flights, like drones and then eVTOLs. So we go with this, and then right now different OEMs. We started with the vertical. Right now, this month I'm going to Delilium, a German factory OEMs, and then looking at the partnership. I mean, go with them because we believe in the eVTOLs and drones. I mean, is the inevitable. Is the future of aviation. So Gözen believes that. So Gözen will be the pioneer in the Turkey and the region. I mean, eastern part of Europe, and then in Turkish area and the Middle East. So we have like a bridge is in the hub. So our senior management believes this is the future aviation or the flight. I mean, general wise.
That's a very, very key message and a very interesting message. You know, a few things you said in there, that really resonated with me. Of course, there's the geographical location of Turkey, the bridge between Europe and Middle East, and also your organization's commitment that the future of aviation and the belief in electrification, not just from the point of view of tourism, but actually also from reducing the carbon dioxide emissions and contributing to the net zero goal that we all have. And interesting to see how such a wide-ranging, an organization with such a wide-ranging portfolio, where you are involved both on the airline side of it, but also on the airline training centers, travel agencies, and so on. So that gives you access to a lot of the ecosystem, but also gives you a lot of experience. What is interesting, and I'd like to build on that perhaps with Kim as our next speaker to deliver key message, is how both yourselves and Omran highlighted vertiports and the need for vertiports, and both from regulatory point of view, but also availability and accessibility of those. So thank you very much. And over to you, Kim, really take us through into the world of Cookie Jar. And what does Cookie Jar do, and what's your motivation in advanced air mobility, please?
Yeah, so thank you very much, and thank you for being here. Well, Cookie Jar, what we do is we try to build affordable ground infrastructure for this type of mobility, advanced air mobility. I think Omran mentioned something that is very key. Why not utilize what already existing heliports, for example, and try to convert that? But I think we are trying to look not only on the cost of build, but also the cost of operation. How can we operate affordably, make sure that we actually reduce the cost? Because unless we reduce the cost of this mobility, it will be replacing helicopters. And what we wish in Cookie Jar is actually that we can replace some of the ground transportation. So we alleviate the ground infrastructure for roads and so on, where we're using trucks and cars today with this type of mobility. One of the first questions I got, besides the name Cookie Jar, I will explain that later maybe, but one of the first questions I usually get is, how big should the platform be? I think the answer is, how big is the aircraft flying to the platform going to be? And that depends on the business case on where we are placing the platform. So certain locations, they are looking at drones. They are not looking at air taxis. Other locations are looking at air taxis, but maybe not the biggest air taxi. So what we thought of was, why don't we make a modular platform that we can mass produce, similar to how IKEA would mass produce tables that we put together in assembly in a very cost efficient and simple way. We were thinking, can we do these platforms in the same way to reduce the cost of installation, reduce the cost of manufacturing? That was the starting point, but also to be able to scale up the platform depending on what's coming in. Think about Dubai Airport, which I worked a lot with in the past. Worked a lot with DANS, Dubai Air Navigation Services, and ADAC as well. They didn't build the airport for an Airbus 380. They adapted the airport when the Airbus 380 came to meet that type of traffic. And we see the same thing with our clients, that they may start with drones and then go up to air taxi services when they see the demand is there. And that alleviates also a little bit about this catch-22 situation where you're thinking, if I build something, will something land? Well, maybe it's easier to get a drone to land in the beginning than an air taxi, especially in the European market where we don't have a deadline, we have a timeline. The other aspect that we are looking at is basically how can we collaborate with the local country community? Makes no, and I think that was already mentioned, makes no sense to produce the platforms in Sweden when they have to be in UAE. So we have actually looked at the concept of small scalable manufacturing plants that we can establish in the countries where we are active, because we believe there will be a lot of platforms that is coming to these areas. Finally, I think everybody has to think about what's the revenue streams for a vertiport. We can't compare ourselves to a heliport, and we can't compare ourselves to an airport. First of all, with a heliport, yes, that may have some revenue streams in terms of MRO services that you can also associate with the location and so on. But you can't put an MRO service in every vertiport location you're existing. That's going to be just too expensive, and you don't have that demand. So we are looking into how can we improve the revenue streams in a different way than the conventional air traffic. And that's basically placing the vertiports where somebody's making money on having the vertiports, willing to pay for having a vertiport at the site, reducing their liabilities, reducing their certification risk, but making all the money on their landside facilities that they already built. So for example, a shopping will already have the shops. A gas station already have a lot of the infrastructure needed to actually service and take care of this type of traffic. So we are looking at those aspects to try to develop something that is more cost efficient overall, reducing the cost, and of course creating scalability, because scalability is the way to reduce the price. So that's a bit about Cookie Jar. And coming to the airspace in Dubai, I was part of the team together with INAV once upon a time that designed the airspace with my other company, Independent Business Group. I know it's extremely complex in the whole country. And I was in the neighboring country as well, Qatar, where obviously it's not the biggest airspace, but I have a lot of military aircrafts that have to share the airspace with the civil traffic. So there's a lot of challenges there that we have to deal with. And I think that's very, very important. It's good to have some people here working with that. So thank you.
Excellent, Kim. Thank you. Thank you for a nice overview and also sharing not just the position in the ecosystem of the vertiport, but also some of the drivers on how to create revenue streams. And we'll dive in a bit more in the question and answer session. So thank you all very much for providing an overview. We now like to open the floor and have an open discussion with all of you. And may I request all the attendees, all the members of the audience, please put your questions in the chat window. I'll kick it off with some of the questions that I have. Now, before we go into looking at are we ready to deliver AAM services, let's first try and see where's the demand coming from. What's driving the demand? Now, in my opening scene setting, I talked about, no doubt, the national drivers, such as in Europe, for example, the Paris Olympics, or in Japan, the Osaka Expo, and so on and so forth. Could you, gentlemen, please share some of the national or regional milestones in your respective countries that might be acting as catalysts for start of advanced air mobility industry there? Maybe let me start with you, Malik, from Oman. What's the scene in Oman in terms of national drivers? Where's the demand coming from, or where's it going to come from?
In Oman, actually, at this stage now, there is no. I haven't come across any useful case of advanced air mobility, though there is a massive use of UAVs in different sectors, and especially in the oil and gas. And I have seen a very good example of one in a local company called Spar. So they are drone service provider, and they are operating in daily basis in the concession areas of oil and gas that belongs to Petroleum Development Oman. So that's one of, I think, the cases where we can see the corporates are enabling the new technologies and utilize it in the best way. Also, as I remember, another project was very good project actually. It's called the 1 Million Palm Project. The 1 Million Palm Project is initiative by His Late Majesty Sultan Qaboos. So the idea of this project actually is to have 1 million palm in different region in Oman. In this project, actually, they have used the drone heavily in the palm plantation, and also for scanning for diseases of the palms as well, and to understand the behavior of those palms. I think these kind of projects are cornerstones for the next upcoming technology, which is the advanced air mobility, because it's very hard maybe to just move to other cases like advanced air mobility, but still your infrastructure and your experience and understanding of UAVs, it's still not matured. But we have this project as a very mature project. In the same time in the region, maybe our colleague is not joined yet from NIOM, but maybe he's the best person to talk about that. NIOM has a really, I think, one of the featured story when it's come to the advanced air mobility. So NIOM, they are invested heavily with I think they invested around $175 million in a company called Helicopters. And they already started to test the different operations in NIOMs. And all of these projects in the region, actually, they are driving the advanced air mobility. I think in future, we will see also some use cases in Oman, especially a logistic one, in the remote areas, hopefully. There is some discussions, but in terms of regulations, I think still in Oman is not yet developed. But last year, Civil Aviation, they have issued a new regulation for UAVs that allowing a lot of, there is a lot of changes have been in that regulation. For example, they are allowing now they will allow for the recreational pilots to operate their drones in pre-designated area. They are giving some more flexibility when it has come to the beyond visual of sight, how to operate and so on. But I think in the region, maybe the good example when it's come to the advanced air mobility, Mr. Umran, maybe they are the leaders in advanced air mobility in the region.
No, that's a very good question you put to Omran, because that fits into what I was going to talk about. And Omran, please do take a lead from here to see, what's driving the national scene within UAE. And whilst you answer that, there is a question for you already in the chat window, and I will repeat that question just as is written. Is the development of advanced air mobility ecosystem in UAE centrally managed, or are initiatives led by a single emirate? So maybe you can give us an overview, first of all, of the national drivers in UAE, and then maybe perhaps give us a view of how the ecosystem development is managed, please.
Thank you, Malik, for the compliment. We aspire always to try to be leaders, and inshallah, we'll all be successful Yes, Manish, as I said, the first, I mean, our country has gone through rapid development, and one of the reasons is embracing innovative new technologies. So we are anything that is new, digital, and of course that doesn't harm you back, we embrace it. So the initiative that was started in 2017, it was relaunched in 2023, last year, by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, the Prime Minister of the country. And he gave us a deadline this time. He did not keep it as an open timeline. He said by 2026, we should have air taxis in the Emirate of Dubai. And that's driving the national agenda. So Dubai was, I would say, a few months ago um, at the lead, and then Abu Dhabi joined the scene with Savvy Cluster, if you've heard about it.
Yeah.
It's a consortium of many OEMs, leading OEMs, basically not just aviation mobility, land, sea, and air, but if we focus on aviation mobility, uh, it's going to serve. I mean, the Emirate of Abu Dhabi is the largest within the United Arab Emirates. Is going to be amazing for, you know, Dubai is going to have a use case. Abu Dhabi is going to have a different use case. But coming back to the question, um, we are, as the federal authority of the UAE, enabling all states that are ready, that are willing to enable them, connect them with the industry, connect the industry with the government, bring the government also together on a round table to discuss, because there are still many things unknown, like the grid system,
Yeah.
the firefighting. How would you do that? The security system, will you impose security screening at the baggage or would you not? Because this is a domestic form of travel, you know?
Yeah.
So there are many unknowns, and we are enabling this form of travel for
That's very good.
the whole country.
That's wonderful, wonderful. I like that, and I think it's something that we will learn from others as well. Perhaps over to you now, Mesut. It's clear that particularly in UAE, they've got a deadline, right? 2026. So no questions asked, bang, off you go. There's a deadline. What's the scene like in Turkey? What's driving this? You're muted, Mesut.
You mean advanced air mobility?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, because UAE, I mean, advanced air mobility, EASA, and also UK, CAA, and Vertical, everybody's working on the regulations too. But from the our DGCA, I mean, our CAA is working on it, the same thing. I mean, like we have UAV in military, they get regulation with the CAE too, and because we have huge arsenal for UAE wise, I mean,
Sure.
big ones. I mean, but at the same time, civilian section, I mean, they got CAA is involved, and we work with the UK CAA and EASA. I mean, because certification is going on process right now, but everybody's involved because it is coming, and then they put the pressure on us, and then UK too. I mean, for the OEMs. I mean,
Sure.
because they've been working for the certification, because certification we've been expecting 2026 at the end of the first quarter of 2026 or second quarter, and for the eVTOLs. I mean, but at the same time, drones, UAVs are flying in the area.
Yeah.
This is controlled by our how do you say, our civil aviation authorities.
Sure,
I mean,
sure. So the demand is actually building as we speak, and once the eVTOL certification takes place in 2026, again, one would expect that's the time that also things to pick up. But that's quite interesting. Now, Kim, your company works across many countries, Middle East, but also in Europe and beyond. Where do you see the differences? I mean, with UAE, it's clear 2026 is the deadline. How do you compare that to what's happening in Europe and other parts of the world?
Well, both UAE and Saudi, I would say, I like that. I must say, I give a compliment to the clear vision of having a deadline, because when you have a deadline, everybody works in a different way. Sweden, we are very known for a very soft stepwise approach, humble people going very slowly, step by step, meaning we work on a timeline. And that timeline is driven by no deadline for some of the state-owned enterprises that we are dependent on, meaning it will go much slower in countries like Sweden and so on. So that is basically the big difference, I say, and that's also why we are in the Middle East with our company. Obviously, it's a Swedish company, so we're not stopping working in Sweden with our pilots, and we're running. We've done the chorus flight between Linköping and Norrköping, which is a VTOL flight, intercity flight, and so on. But I think that's the main difference. Now you may wonder why I sit in a small country called Monaco. Well, actually, that's the exception here in Europe. They don't have to follow the EASA ruling. They do follow it, but in fact, it's a much shorter decision making. And we proved that last year when we conducted the last mile delivery to a mega yacht here in the Monaco Yacht Show. In fact, it took them only 2 weeks to approve the flight with all the authorities, because it's a small nation, quite efficient in that way. But one of the key messages I said to everybody during the show is that 2 weeks is light years in terms of speed compared to Sweden at the moment. But frankly, tomorrow it has to happen like this, on demand. Then this has to be seamless. It has to go in the background, and all the authorities have to come there. And I think, to be very honest, UAE and Saudi will be the first to prove that in practice, whilst the Europeans are very structured in and have a lot of finance power in terms of developing the regulatory frameworks that may inspire these pilot cases and rollouts, I would say, rather, in the Middle East. So that's how we see it.
No, it's very interesting. You say that. There's a question from Yap. I think it's best addressed to Omran. And Yap writes, what do you think could be a good crawl, walk, and then run approach to introduce this new type of aviation, particularly in your region? And, where do you start, and how to proceed from them? In view of what you mentioned earlier on, Omran, with the vision of your Crown Prince and moving on and forward, what's a good starting point for any region to kick off on this journey?
I think the simple answer is just to start.
Yeah,
really.
often the easiest one, the most simplest one. Yeah,
absolutely. Because I mean, collectively within any organization, within the ecosystem of the country, a lot of the states have developed mature aviation knowledge. Almost all countries have airlines, have civil aviation systems. ICAO has been, great in distributing that knowledge as well. So, when was the last time there was a breakthrough? What I listened from my peers, it was when the jet engine was, sort of produced and brought to the aviation, and that was years and years ago. So imagine the conversation that the propeller guys were having with the jet engine guys. It was probably the same conversation now we're having with, the eVTOL, who some of even, my colleagues call it a toy. I said, this is going to revolutionize the way we travel.
Yeah.
And how we are taking it, we don't know all the answers. There are so many questions, but you and will never, even currently today, in a very mature aviation system, such as the airlines or the Boeings or the Airbuses, they still don't know everything.
Mm,
They even still, some things still today go wrong, and the news recently are a testament to that.
yeah.
How did we get that wrong? We still won't be able to get everything perfectly,
Yeah.
but we will work towards
Mm,
perfection.
mm,
We will work towards 10 to the minus 9. We will put proper safeguard measures, and you will start and you will learn as you go. And this is, I believe, is the a perfect example of crawl, walk, run approach. But the trick is, as you start or you want to crawl, you don't want to move too fast that you fall on your face, or
correct.
you restrict too much yourself that you
Mm,
cannot even move a step. So that has to be a balance, a calculated balance to be able to move gradually and, reduce the restrictions. Maybe have restrictions in place and then be able to remove them and move away from the prejudices of existing regulations, let's
yeah.
say. Yeah.
Very wise words. Thank you, Omran. Yes. So, and I think you agree with Jaap's comment, of course, here, which is to crawl, walk, and run. But I like the spirit. Just start. Keep it easy and learn as you go. And you're absolutely right. Across the world, the more we work, the more we talk to people, the more we learn that actually nobody has all the answers, but there's only one way we can find out, and that is through working in a balanced way. I want to move the conversation now more towards the challenges of achieving the let's say commercial advanced air mobility operations and scaling. And of course, one of the things that we have touched on, but perhaps let's take a little deeper dive into it, is the regulatory framework itself. Now, Omran, you've already highlighted that UAE was one of the earlier ones, organizations and countries to come up with the regulations itself. But do you think the question is for every one of you really, can, does the can the regulation cope with the speed with which the technology is evolving as such? And because this applies not just in aviation, but even if you look at in telecoms or other sectors, it's always the same. The technology comes first, and then regulations catch up. Not necessarily wrong at all, but perhaps you could share some of the views. And Malik, maybe I'll ask you to kick off with your experience of how the challenges faced by the CAAs of Middle East to cope with the speed with which technology is evolving in this area.
I think this is one of the question that we can talk about in different aspects. And the primary challenge that is ensuring the regulatory frameworks are adopted to the technology advancement. This is the core challenge with which come to the regularity. But also we have to understand the framework.
Mm-hmm.
So always you need to a use case or technology. So you can, based on that, you can reflect and build your frameworks. We had an experience with civil aviation. We worked with them for more than 1 year and a half, where we involved every stakeholder in the country in one table and discussing all the challenges and understanding all the processes. And based on that, we started to lean those processes before we automate them into a digital infrastructure, because you want to make sure also sustainability of these frameworks, they can adapt in any future changes. I believe personally that regularity should always act as innovation enabler. This is the mindset that we need in our region, or maybe in the world. I mean, we need to see always the regularity as innovation enabler, pushing for new regulations. Even if the regulations are not ready, they should have another frameworks like the sandbox or working internally some frameworks until it's become mature, then they can issue the official frameworks. So we need also that we should have internally frameworks that help us to adapt fast. Because you know that civil aviation, they don't work alone. They have to work with other entities, the military, the airports, the police, and different entities in the country. We need to find always different approaches that to help to push to start. As Amran said, we need to start. And with the current regulations, for example, it will be very hard to start, but we need to always find a way for civil aviation and for any regularity in telecom or any other one, they can push for this technology advancement and to see how they can benefit the private sector and the country.
Thank you, Malik. Mesut, what's the scene like in Turkey? How do the regulators work there? Does the industry and regulation people, do they work together? And is the speed with which the regulations are being developed, is that matching the needs of the industry? What's your view from Turkey? You're muted, Mesut.
I agree, Omran and Malik. I mean, we should start like a sandbox or regulatory framework with cooperatively. I mean, like UK, they do that. In Europe, they do different programs. Government need to support them. I mean, Sierra, one of them I remember is Sierra, Eurocontrol, EASA, they work the program. I mean, everybody should contribute, chip in. I mean, because advanced, I mean, AAA, because it is coming, it is technology, it is coming. So we should get together as like a sandbox. I mean, a sort of unique framework. Everybody should get involved. Companies and regulatory CAAs and government should support that too. Government should support, but we need to push them. We need as like a leading firm, as a Gözen, and we went to our CAA, we briefed them, and I said, it is coming, it is technology is coming. So they use symposium and use the universities. Right now we sat on the table together, but it still is going on process. Yeah. Because technology, big guys like an airline operator, we are an airline operator too, because airline doesn't want involved with, as Omran said, like a small, like a toys or small aviation tools and getting their system. But it is coming. It's VFR, low altitude, but it's coming, and then we use this air together. Yeah. Of course, it will start with the VFR, but I mean, of course, it start with the low altitude, but it should be combined and work together cooperatively. But we use, I mean, in England, I see nets, universities, government, they together, they put like a 10 million pounds as a program. I know that. So we need to do that too. Yeah. I mean,
so run it as a program, run it as a top-down thing, bringing everyone together.
Yes.
Such the industry, the academia, the government, the policymakers, the regulators, bring them together. And
yes,
that's very interesting. Now, moving over to you, Kim, you touched on briefly in your keynote about the revenue system that as a vertiport provider and operator, it is important that you don't just create the vertiport, but actually link them to some industry that is seeking Could you dive a little bit more into it? You gave two examples, one of which I think was a gas station, and the other one was more like a shopping mall. How do you envisage? How could that work in your philosophy?
But it's quite simple. If I look at everybody here in the panel, maybe you can raise your hand. Would you pay 2,500 dirham for a landing today? Yes or no? Raise your hand if you say yes. Nobody would do it, right?
I won't pay for it.
That's the fees for a helicopter today in the UAE in some places. So, I mean, that is the main problem. How can we get down to 300 dirhams and maybe we pay 100 each? That's how we have to think. The problem with a vertiport is it's not like Abu Dhabi Airport or DXB in Dubai, where you have millions and millions of passengers coming. You're going to land the X amount of VTOLs an hour per touchdown and lift-off area. So you don't get the volume of people in the same sense. So you can't really say you become a billionaire on for example, restaurant business or tax-free market or whatever you would call it in duty-free shops in these locations. So what we have been thinking is, but if you have an industry, let's say you are a shopping mall and you want to attract people to come through your place, like almost if you go to Ras Al Khaimah, they are building a casino. I will tell you, they will be perfect in driving people in the right way, so you spend as much money as possible through that way. So if you want to attract a lot of people for the shop, of course, the best place is to have the vertiport on top of your shop, so they have to go through your shop. And of course, how many people, oh, why not buy a couple of milks? And then you think, oh, maybe I should buy this and this. And suddenly you spent like 200-300 dirhams on food whilst you're going home from your trip. This is where we see synergy. So that's just an example of thinking. However, a shop is not very suitable to run an airport business or vertiport business. And that's why we think we can provide a service to them by facilitating the operation, taking the liabilities. We'll cover the landing fees and they'll get the landside fees. And that's a way of, already utilizing existing infrastructure, existing businesses, and actually accelerating their income. And that's a little bit how we think about it. Yes, you could build a shop and a duty-free, but a lot of the locations there which offer, let's say, lease my land and then build a vertiport, they would not like to have a shopping mall under the vertiport because that would compete with the shopping mall on that land. You see my point? So that's why otherwise, yes, I could get the land lease for a vertiport and then make a deal and concession with somebody owning a shopping mall industry to build under me, and I make money from that. But that's not how it looks in the market today. And I also believe that it's more important to have a lot of vertiports and a lot of locations because it adds redundancy to the network of vertiports. That means if you have a problem landing, you can land somewhere close by, always. So it's more important to have vertiports spread out than to have a big hub taking a lot of traffic. So
interesting ideas, Kim, I think. So I think the key message from your side really is that particularly if we link the vertiports to an existing industry, whether it's shopping mall or it's the gas stations or burgers and so on and so forth, burger joints, is not to burden those industries on spending capital expenditure on building the whole infrastructure, but perhaps to offer a service to them, which could effectively be part of their operational expenditure, but not the capex.
Yeah, that's basically how we think. And we have an example. I worked with a Swedish company called Stadium. They're a sports retailer. I think you have one in Dubai Mall. Looks exactly the same as our Swedish one, so I'm sure there's some deal there between them. But one of the things that we did in the first case, my engineer came back, great, we have found a solution. We can send the tennis shoes for 80 euro, which is by far too expensive to send tennis shoes because it's more expensive than the shoe itself. So really important to understand the customer's need, understand the price market, and then see what type of traffic is going to go there to actually fit that business case.
Yeah.
So that's how we try to work with it. And then the challenge is how can we do it fitting the regulations, which is safety is number one, for sure. But the cost efficiency is number two. Otherwise, we don't even get the location in the first place. So
thank you, Kim, and thanks very much. I think we've hit that 3 o'clock Central European time deadline. I thank you all for sharing your views, some of the things that you have shared with us, which have resonated with me, and I hope that the audience will also appreciate. Don't insinuate, don't think too much, just start the journey. Learn as you go. The advanced air mobility is going to come, whether you like it or not. So just get ready for it. Try and link your demand model of creating your advanced air mobility ecosystem with an existing industry where you can actually offer them support in doing something, scaling it and doing it cheaply as such. And the regulations, they need to enable innovation. And that's the partnership that needs to work together between industry and stakeholders. And sandbox frameworks are one of the examples for it. So we've learned something about Oman, we've learned about UAE, we've learned about Turkey and the role of industry in all these countries across Middle East. Thank you very much for your thought-provoking ideas. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the day, but I'm sure if you all keep an eye that there are going to be more and more developments in the advanced air mobility. You've been a great audience. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.